What is going on, you guys? It's your boy, Productivity Pushers or Peddling Pussies here, and we're back with episode 79. If I've said it once, I've said it a million times. It has been a while. Since I made some of these, I actually just been away from my computer, so that's kind of one warrantable excuse for me not doing these for a while. But it's also kind of a necessary gap of solitude that I need to have, which I distinguish very clearly from loneliness. In order for me to be in the right headspace for these, because again, as improvisational, as laughably improvisational as these videos seem to be, there is some standard that I have for these, and I found that if I literally just randomly turn on the recording and start talking, I tend to stop, after like 10 minutes and be like, man, that was terrible. What the fuck am I talking about? Because I at least I can kind of tell when, at least on some qualitative level, when I'm getting, when I'm not going anywhere, even just philosophically, when I'm not able to, I say penetrate my own mind, but really just get to anything that I would find interesting, right? Versus just talking. Because I can like be surface level and crack jokes and stuff, but that's not really the point of this. I don't think. Not that there is really a point. I think the point is that there's no point, but there also is kind of a exploratory externality that I want with these. That I at least want to be interesting and not trivial. I don't know. But again, sometimes it ends up being trivial, but if it doesn't have sufficient exploration, right? In whatever sense that might mean, I realize that's kind of vague in its own right, but either way, I don't know. So I guess that's part of the reason for these longer gaps sometimes between these is I guess one, just geographically, if I'm away from my computer, which I record these, I can't do it that often. But also I need to have, I hesitate to say like alone time, or that I think solitude is the right word, which I think is a distinct concept from loneliness. And maybe I'll kind of dissect that a little bit, because it's easy to not really know the difference, especially if you're, I guess, just kind of observing somebody in a alone state, whether or not they're lonely or just kind of engaging in a solitary, in solitude, I suppose, like a verb, as an activity, because they do look exactly the same, and I mean, so do a lot of different things, but regardless. I think solitude is really important. I've obviously talked at length about the importance of like rumination in some sense, or just reflection. And this is like kind of this only comes about in periods or contexts in which there is true solitude, right? I think like me being in a social context, you're always an object of somebody else. So there's always like this intrinsic fear of judgment. And obviously I would like to run around and tell you how much, how free from judgment I am even around my peers, but it just does not work. It's kind of a biological impossibility for you to be truly free from judgment, or to kind of truly be while you're in in a social setting of any kind, meaning just not just you. With being just you kind of only have yourself. And I suppose unless you're kind of formulating, other personas in which you're in your own social setting, which kind of is its own problem. Diagnosable probably is, NPD. But regardless, you can't really achieve solitude in an absolute sense, really in any sense, in a social setting. So it kind of requires this ability to be alone. I also think again, I don't mean to sound overly cynical with this analysis, but you do spend probably most of your time alone, I guess, unless you're fortunate, or I wouldn't even say fortunate enough because it's not really a good thing, unless you're in a circumstance in which you're around people for most of the day. But even then, I think you would, again, kind of living right, you'd grow to yearn for some solitary time, and I think we see that manifest in all different types of ways. And I also want, I suppose the other thing about being alone, because it's not like I don't vindicate or like hate social interaction of any kind. I even make myself engage in some sense when it's, when solitude becomes too overbearing. But I also kind of think that there's nothing more lonely than being with the wrong person or the wrong people, which I think also tends to manifest itself in lots of, people have very interesting compensatory behaviors and actions in which they deal with that loneliness. Maybe they don't even realize the fact that they're around the wrong people, or just, they're feeling so lonely despite being surrounded by people, which I think is people are, I don't know, some people probably deal with that a lot. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. I'm not asking you to make judgments on yourself or anyone else. I just mean for you to validate me in the sense that this exists, and I'm not making that really any of this up as like these like fake things. But I think a lot of people, again, even they're in romantic or work or whatever relationships, and they have to spend a lot of time with people, they feel super lonely despite being with somebody all the time. And again, maybe I think it's a lack of time with yourself. Because again, getting back to what I was saying, you do spend most of your time with yourself. Again, unless you're somehow able to engage in, I don't know. I mean, even when you're sleeping, you cannot be socially sleeping. That's not how it works. You could be sleeping in a bed with somebody else, but ultimately when the lights are off and your eyes are shut, it's just you in there. And if that's all the solitude you get, I pity you, I guess. Sorry. I wish that wasn't the peak of your solitude. I do think there's a lot of benefit. Maybe not even just some professional career development. I just mean even just for you to have living well. I mean, I don't even know how a better way to say that. In being okay with yourself, having, kind of relishing and enjoying solitude. There's a lot of great thinkers and people that, have produced great things, by whatever metric you want to do, although that shouldn't be important what other people's metrics of your production are. But regardless, they've all relished solitude, and they've spoken at lengths about its critical importance to their ability to think and produce anything, really. So again, I'd say that's looking on the outside looking in, it wouldn't be hard to, say, oh, this person, Mr. Bucket seems quite lonely, and that's, probably not entirely true, because there is kind of this fine line between, freedom and loneliness, or solitude and loneliness, or I'm not trying. Maybe there's a better word than loneliness, because that just kind of seems juvenile a little bit. But I don't know. There's because there's a lot of people like to point to a lot of health studies about how dangerous being lonely is. It's it's like smoking 10 packs of cigarettes a day. And I think we're perhaps looking at the wrong side of that, because we tend to attribute that to, people need to be less alone. People need to have more, connection. And I guess people aren't really alone. It would take me 5 seconds to, I can go on Omegle or something and video chat with somebody in 5 seconds. That's somebody. I could walk outside, there's all ways. That's not what they mean. It's not the sense of we need more accessibility for people to not be alone. I think on one hand, people are around the wrong people. So, being aware that you're even around the wrong people is a difficult, isn't really a trivial exercise in deciding whether or not these people are people that you can be around and be, at least some closer semblance of your true self than some, LinkedIn head equivalent of yourself, right? Because I think it's all people that were around that, were more or less a LinkedIn manifestation of ourselves, which is sickening, but regardless. But the other part of that is that people are, and I'm not just going to say people here, I'm just going to use a vague they, aren't really great at being by themselves. They don't know what to do themselves. I mean, I've even tasked people who are oh man, I spend so much time on Twitter or Instagram or some shit. I don't even know what they spend time on. And then I'm have you ever tried just sitting in silence? No stimulation, no AirPods, no guided meditation, none of that shit, nothing. I mean, dead fucking silence. Or just the ambient noise of I don't know, the forest, or even the city. It doesn't even matter. It doesn't have to be somebody talking. Just dead, no actual noise, being alone with your own thoughts. And people well, I can't. I need something to chew on. No, you don't. You can't. I think if you're unable to sit in dead silence with yourself for 10 minutes, I mean, I could probably do it for hours and hours before I would, begin to have some kind of psychosis. But 10 minutes, if you can't, actively do it for 10 minutes, there's something wrong with you. I'm just going to say that. I'm going to diagnose you from, your browser. Me. If you cannot sit alone with your thoughts for 10 minutes, you have a problem. And so I don't know. I guess if you feel threatened by that, prove me wrong. Go set a timer for 10 minutes. Lay down or sit down or whatever. Close your eyes. Dead silent. No AirPods. Nothing. No book. No crutch. There's no crutch here. Dead silence. See if you can do it for 10 minutes. If you can, congrats. I mean, some people are like, how difficult is that? Was it horrible? I mean, what happened? What'd you do right after? What kind of headspace did this push you in? What kind of exercise is this for you? And then some people are like, oh, my time's too valuable. I can't be doing that. I got stuff to do. No, you fucking don't. You do not. You were just telling me about how much time you spend on Instagram or whatever, Twitter, or whatever the fuck they're calling it these days. Your time is not that valuable. You can't spare 10 minutes to sit there in silence with your own thoughts. Some people are just scared. Oh, well, what's going to happen? Are you going to come out of this and be a terrorist? Is that, what does that tell you about you? How much is your subconscious guiding, that you're ignoring, because in one sense, that's one way of putting it, is that, being alone with your own thoughts is you're only ever exposing kind of your brain or your conscious mind, your directing mind, however you want to describe it, to the very surface kind of like layer of oil on top of, your entire mind, which is your subconscious, all these memories and experiences repressed and not whatever. However much you're guarding yourself from what's below that oil, and I'm not saying to, dive deep into the bowels of your soul and, come out, as, embracing your inner sociopath. That's not what I'm advocating for either. I just think being completely out of touch with any kind of, surface, any non-surface level abstraction of your mind is a dangerous way to live. And I don't mean dangerous for like other people, like you're going to go shoot them. I mean dangerous as a way that that's not a life well lived. And again, I kind of comes back, it's really hard for me to like make a judgment like that and saying like how it's going to be bad without it just being bad or something. I can't really be specific on how this is going to manifest itself. Maybe there, and it's not, and it's because it's really difficult to make sweeping judgments about people, or at least how this would be problematic for people when I don't know them. Maybe it manifests itself. Maybe you do become a murderer if you don't, if you ignore all these, inner impulses and you're not in touch with your mind. I don't know what's going to happen to you. Maybe you're just a little miserable your whole life, or a little empty, or a little bit of a pussy. Maybe it's like your life is fine, there's nothing wrong with you, but you're kind of always a pussy. I don't really know. There's certainly a more articulate way of putting that. But that's just kind of the easiest way I put it. Is just, you can kind of live your whole life as kind of a coward, or maybe you like always thought that you could be more, but you just kind of refuse to. You kind of always just repress that part of you. Maybe you just, you knew that you were more than a mid-level product manager at big tech company, but you never really bothered to engage the more, the deeper part of you. You enjoyed Counter-Strike too much, or however, or whatever. I don't even know what else the fuck you people do all day, so I'm not even going to bother with that. But I suppose that's another thing I want to dispel, and this isn't me defending my strange, weird activities or whatnot, or really just me defending my own right on what I'm doing. When people, and again, because this only comes to mind because I was in more social situations that I'm used to. Whether it would surprise you or not, I'm a bit of the weirdo in a lot of these things, and just what I choose to do, and kind of these strange hills I decide to die on, and things I choose not to do. And of course, I guess running Arch Linux is probably amounts to about 80% of all that, because there's a lot that you just kind of refuse to do once you once you've taken the pill, so to speak. Linux pill, of course. There's a lot you refuse to do. So yeah, of course I'm a bit of a weirdo. And some people, and again, I'm not really have anybody in mind in particular, but it might be easy to think that I do anything I do as a matter of like, oh, I want to, not waste as much time. Because maybe I've spoken about this before, but I'm more strongly rejecting what I would call idle pleasures. And these aren't, I'm not able to perfectly encapsulate what these things are, but idle pleasures, I mean, it's kind of like the whole, porn, when you see it kind of thing. I don't exactly know I know what an idle pleasure is when I see it, watching Netflix, idle pleasure. Really just watching anything that isn't, even just podcasts, idle pleasure. Now, book reading, I actually don't consider idle pleasure. It has to be a physical book, and it has to be the only thing I'm doing. I can't be listening to music and reading. That doesn't count. And even like I want to like stop compounding, pleasures. So it's like I obviously enjoy listening to music when I do stuff, but I'm trying to do that less and less, only because it gets to a point where then you have to have like this ridiculous set of criteria in order to get anything done. Like, in order for you to answer the 2 work emails you've been putting off, you have to like have 3 monitors. One has, I don't know, Rick and Morty. One's got, it's a music mix, and the other one's got, I don't know, some news site or something. Like, you gotta have like 4 different things. You gotta have a foot massager massaging your feet in order for you to focus. Like, at what point does it end? What the hell are we doing? Can we not just open a simple email client, answer the emails, and be done with it? Like, it's, it takes you like 2 hours to get set up just to do like what is really a pretty trivial activity. It's like it's answering 2 emails. Like, you obviously don't want to do it, but you got to go through all this ritual of shit to get anything done. It's ridiculous. Anyway, so I'm trying to get away from that. And even though it's like probably completely harmless of me to like not want to listen to music while I do something, because it doesn't make it more enjoyable or just suck less. Not doubting that at all. But I kind of don't want to be dependent on that kind of thing. I don't ever want to open that can of worms, so to speak. But regardless, I think it's easy to look at that and go, oh, well, you must be just like some productivity guru, all about productivity. And no, this is kind of where I want to defend myself, because I really feel like there is, it's very easy to think that I'm all about like getting stuff done, hustle money. I obviously, if you listen to any more than a minute of what I don't give a shit about money. I've said before, I think money is for complete morons. I think the abstraction of it is it's a beautiful philosophical concept. Its manifestation is poisonous to the human soul. It poisons people beyond irreparable damage to the human psyche, the human soul, and just the incentive structure of existing, right? I think people are so blinded by, the prospect of money and this like security and like, oh, they're going to die and be homeless if they don't have it. It just poisons the entire human experience. So I fucking hate money. So, but absolutely not. You cannot put me into this like, oh, this person, runs Arch Linux and does stuff from the command line because he wants to be more productive or whatever. And I think it improves whatever, money hustler stuff that I would do anyway. But that's not at all what the whole point of it is. It is almost exclusively a philosophical grievance with the current human. And I don't mean like any particular human, but what the human is now, I think, is a shell of what it could be. I'm not saying what it was at any point or anything. I'm not making this like historical argument, but I think in terms of human potential, there is an astronomical amount wasted by what we have done to ourselves. And a lot of my, kind of strange ideological things are not under the guise of me wanting to be more productive by whatever money or whatever thing you want to package that as, but merely as me trying to defend and revive human flourishing. So I guess an easy way to put this is like, vice or virtue. Okay. I just want to live a virtuous life, right? It's not a matter of like, making money is not, inherently virtuous or viceful, really. I mean, it really shouldn't be that, but I guess the way I phrase it is, in today's day, and I'm not saying in 1980 or whatever, today's day and age, it kind of leans viceful, I think, by default. It's really hard to be to virtuously pursue money as any kind of end. It almost needs to be like an accidental externality of your work. is money just kind of comes along. And then I think because people make you, oh, well, it's not nothing inherently immoral about making money. I think in the year of our Lord 2024, or the year of AI, really, it kind of is actually. There's not really any kind of way to morally make without some, without it being in some roundabout way, or really in a not so roundabout way, just being sacrificial of your human flourishing. Because that's ultimately why I think it's so bad. It's not that, like, sure, you can make money like serving soup to people and whatever, I don't know, massaging people's feet or something. I don't know, whatever the fuck you people do for money. I have no idea. But I think what my problem is it serves as a replacement of incentives for the flourishing of the human soul, which has so much more to do than just something to do with money. And if I look at the number of hours we've spent, number of human hours of any kind, any human, any hour, whatever, towards fruitless ends of money making in some sense, what a fucking waste. This is why I'm so spiteful of it. It's a complete waste. And I'm not saying that like every human hour is equal and like, we should give grocery store clerks the UBI so they can like, human flourishing. People don't even know how like to develop themselves. And people don't even know how to stay in shape, for God's sakes, which is a pretty simple calculation. Just, calories in, calorie out, the law of thermodynamics. We've known this for a while, but people are unable to execute a very simple calculation. Whether by ignorance or by some other means, that I don't have much confidence in their ability, at least collectively, to engage in human flourishing. Now, that being said, I would love to give as many people as possible the ability for them to allow themselves to flourish. But when given the autonomy, people, instead of choosing flourishing or virtuous activities, they choose to, I don't know, double down and be drop shippers or something, or do something equally pointless. And this also isn't an outright advocacy for the arts. People just making music or bullshit art the whole time. There's a lot of people who are very engineering and like kind of I guess technologically focused. Or I would put myself in that category to an extent. Right? If you gave me complete free autonomy in all of my affairs, I would probably be making some kind of gadget of some kind, which I am already. Actually, I do that. That's how I spend my time outside of doing. That's what I do with all my extra time that I save by running Arch Linux instead of Windows. But regardless, I think there's just a huge divulsion between what I think people should be doing and what is actually done. And of course, well, maybe this is all just personal preference. Who am I to be making judgments about what other people do? But at a certain point, that's what anybody does, right? If I were a lawmaker of some kind, that would be my whole job, in some sense, which I also kind of want to dispute the whole idea of jobs and working, because I think that the whole paradigm itself was a little flawed, at least in what it means, because working has so many different meanings to everybody. Like working to some people is, just like whatever they do from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Or working is like whatever I do to make money. Or work is like, people even consider like laundry work or something like that. Or just like a career. Maybe that's like whatever your career is. If you're an attorney, your work is like career. It's whether it be answering emails or like on the phone with somebody. I don't really know what people's conception of work is. My conception of work, which I like to say I don't really work in that sense at all, but my idea, the reason I don't say that I work, because I do work, but the reason I don't like to say that I work is because people think it's like, oh, I work the same way, like, I do laundry, or I would, be on the phone or answer emails. Like none of that I don't consider work. I'd say consider work like the exploration of novel ideas, or the usage of one's mind to virtuous ends, which is a very vague conception of work, but is not in all the way that is framed, financially or just colloquially in our society. So it's the reason I don't really like to say that I am working all the time, which I guess maybe it's work to some, but work is play to another. So I don't really know what to call work or what not to, because there's not really an end or a beginning in either of them, at least in my sense. I don't know. But I wish the work was framed more virtuously. And I know I'm really leaning on these words, virtue and vice, heavily, but I find it hard to to frame, I guess, good and bad without just saying good and bad. And without it being that like, oh, I'm just talking about Superman or the Joker or something like that, because, I don't know, one's bad as, as another's good, and evil is all kind of a relative concept. Even like, I don't know, something as seemingly black as white and white as murder is like, in some ways is virtuous, right? With, if somebody's on a shooting spree and you have to kill them to like stop them killing more people or something, or if it's like, well, this person's gonna murder everything, like, would you kill baby Hitler? There's all these questions. So a lot of times it all, who fucking knows, really? It's all kind of this hodgepodge mess of good and evil. And so I kind of choose to define them in my own right. And I like to use the words virtue and vice, virtue as being things I think are good. Like, I think idle pleasures are viceful. Right. And some people are like, oh, I love my podcast. I can't live without my podcast. Fuck podcasts. I don't want to listen to them. I don't want anything to do with it. That's viceful. And I know it's like kind of going out on a weird limb and a kind of a strange hill to die on, something as seemingly inane as podcasting. But unfortunately, that's my framing. And if you don't, sorry, I guess you don't, go fuck yourself. Right. And virtuous to me is like, is producing something, right? Wrestling with difficult questions, or some kind of creation of some kind, building something weird or new or whatever. So these videos, as dumb as they are and a complete waste of time they are financially or whatever, this is a virtuous activity in my eyes, because it's, exploration, it's it's me speaking in some sense, trying to articulate my thoughts, which is difficult enough. I mean, people are communication is, is a very difficult thing for a lot of people of all different backgrounds, because they have no connection between what they're thinking and what they're saying. And even my connection is still shitty. And I've spent up to 79 hours or whatever at this point, trying to improve this, brain mouth connection, but it still is pretty bad, because I find horribly inarticulate ways of phrasing things, which, are almost insulting to the concepts themselves. But I suppose effort is something to be praised here. So I guess this is a semblance of me trying. So this is why I think it's a virtuous activity. And again, there's nobody in their right mind would ever pay me to do anything like this. And I'm not. There's no viewership. There's no stakes behind this. I can go weeks and weeks without posting, and I have. But to me, this is a virtuous activity and something I would defend myself doing, which I don't expect everybody to, like, I guess, agree with that, with that conception of work, right? But in some sense, this is work for me, right? But like, I kind of view work as what should be a good thing. I think part of the problem in making work like a boogeyman, like, oh, I don't want to go to work today, is, then it becomes this very clear separation of like good and bad. Like, work is bad, anything not work is good. But then it's like, it kind of also just lends itself towards hedonism in some sense, because you don't want to be working, so you'll be doing something pleasureful, which, again, if work isn't pleasureful to you, then you have to, like, I don't know, go get hammered or something, or get super high, or whatever else people do that is supposed to be, this like fun or not work activity, whatever. So I don't know, I kind of view it as a fault of framing work in this way where it's, work sucks, boo work. Which again, I think modern conceptions of work indeed suck, and I wouldn't wish them on my worst enemy. And in some ways it's, I'd rather, die not working than live to work. At least with what work is people are doing, right? Kind of the same as, dying on my feet versus living on my knees. Which again, I understand why work is so seen as bad, but I don't really want to view it as that way. Which is why I hate using the word work at all, really. So, I don't know. Again, very weird philosophical disposition and kind of a strange hills to die on here. And maybe it's just a representation of my Zoomer generation and all of our weird quirks and things. But alas, I will move on to something else, because I feel like I've exhausted what I have to say on that. It's actually kind of a weird. I'm gonna try to frame this in I don't know, a way that isn't predictable. I guess, not to try and be not predictable, but just because I don't want it to come off as something that it's not, whatever that means. Anyway, I'm actually glad that some of these. So I've been very critical of big tech. People might be calling me the big tech cynic. Might be apt description of my many grievances with their platforms and their technology. But I'm actually glad that they're doing some of the stuff that they're doing, and I guess allow me to reframe this in a way that is more true to my form. They're making all the dumbest moves possible. You know, like they're just, I mean, I think objectively at some point, I mean, because think about this. I'm obviously a huge Windows critic. I think Windows is a complete waste of time. And like, what if, you know, by some, I guess, some stroke of luck or genius or whatever, or actually strategy would really be the thing. What if Windows 11 was actually, again, this is crazy, better than Windows 10? Wow, that would be, I would have less to say, but it's not. It is objectively and, you know, just without a doubt, really, in any kind of measurable sense, way worse. So I'm actually glad that they're doing this, right? They're like, you know, pushing Windows 11. Oh, yay, Windows. And someone who's proudly never even touched the damn thing. I'm glad it sucks so hard. I mean, I saw somebody's work computer that they'd showed me. It was running Windows 11. You know, good 16 gigs of RAM, 6-core processor, you know, GPU. It's got, you know, some, I mean, it's kind of a shitty, like a 2 VRAM GPU, whatever. And again, if you don't know the computers, you don't have to, it's only for like the computer nerds who know what any of that means. And the thing was running, I mean, hilariously slow. Like if I had, I would not be surprised if they put a Bitcoin miner in the operating system. That's kind of how bad it was. And, you know, my first thing was like, oh my God, you know, poor soul. Why doesn't this guy just run? What are you doing on this thing that you need Windows? You know, just, you know, Linux Mint would, you know, quadruple the speed of this in a heartbeat. Well, anyway, I tried to hesitate and think about, you know, why I was frustrated in that sense, but I'm actually glad that they're kind of shooting themselves in the foot, because I think them, along with a lot of other companies, are kind of spelling the beginning of their slow descent downwards. These huge incumbents. So I'm gonna Microsoft, Google, Apple, Nvidia, whatever, you know, add and put all of them in the same group, whatever. They don't just like, oh, Google's filing for bankruptcy, it's over. That's not how it's ever going to go down. Like, these companies will go down, they always do. It's kind of this like this life cycle, right? You know, it all follows the same thing. Some things last 100 years, 200 years. There will come a day when these companies have their reckoning and they'll die, whatever. I think that's just kind of a universal truth. It's like they're, you know, because we treat companies so human-like, that, you know, they will die eventually, you know, just as humans do. Sometimes it just takes a couple hundred years. You know, there were, you know, oil incumbents and, you know, railroad companies or whatever that all, you know, people were like, oh, it's Google. They can't ever lose. Oh, it's, you know, oil or whatever, big oil or whatever the fuck it is. They all end up dying at some point. And so they will end up dying too. But I think perhaps we're really seeing this very strong beginning of the end. You know, so obviously Windows 10 or Windows 11 or whatever the fuck, Windows 13, whatever they're going to drop on, since that's getting progressively worse and seemingly there's no direction about it getting better, I think it does kind of, you know, put a very obvious mark on their descent into oblivion. But other companies are following suit. I mean, Apple's Vision Pro has hilariously been mocked, mocked to the end, to the nth degree of what's even considered normal mockery of tech products these days. I think in general, like, anytime people, you know, it's not like, you know, and again, maybe I'm just kind of thinking too much about, you know, romanticizing the past in a sense, but people are very optimistic about, you know, the web and how it's going to change to where I think in general, especially these younger generations are much more hesitant to adopt these things. I mean, have you ever actually went out and tried to find people that are super bullish on like the Apple Vision Pro? Who, honest to God, thinks like the metaverse is the future? I think it's like a small minority. You know, in comparison, you know, in the early days of the internet, people, you know, they're sure that maybe was a minority too. But it quickly became, you know, like more and more people were adopting it. But I just don't see that trajectory being mimicked with the current huge incumbents. And I think, I'm trying to think of other notable examples here. I mean, Google Chrome is, again, getting worse. How are these things getting worse? Isn't there like more and more dev time now than there ever has been, and more money behind these? How are these products getting, like, you think about looking from an accounting perspective, how could you be spending, you know, however much more on Windows 11 than Windows 10, and it gets worse? How? I don't see how that's even possible. But I'm glad it does, because if it got better, it might extend their life cycle a little bit, which of course I hope these things die. So I'm glad to see their products get worse. So there's actually a bit of kind of roundabout nihilistic optimism towards these tech companies, which it might sound a little tongue-in-cheek in some sense, but I'm glad that they're making such boneheaded plays when it comes to their products, because eventually, it kind of gives more of a margin to people who don't refuse to use it, right? People who, I installed Linux on this poor soul's computer and like, wow, this thing runs really fast. Yeah, no, it does. It does actually, it's doesn't suck. Whereas before it might have been, Windows 7 or like, early Windows 3 or I don't even know whatever. It might have been more comparable. There's like, less spyware, doesn't look as shitty, whatever. Not to mention all the telemetry and stuff built in. But either way, it kind of gives more of the edge against any non-incumbent player in any space. So this goes for, I don't know, other VR headsets and stuff. I do think VR has some kind of future, but I think it's mostly just like in like the fun space. It's kind of a party trick of sorts. I don't view it as like the day that I sign a new job and I have to go work in the metaverse. I think I'd rather just jump off the bridge, and I don't see. Even this like Gen Alpha, as pessimistic as I am about them, I don't see them chomping at the bit to strap goggles to their face for 15 hours a day. It's bad enough as is. They're, and maybe generations have their own. Maybe like I thought about generations and their defining characteristics. Where millennials might be anxious or just depressed, Zoomers are nihilistic. And sometimes that nihilism is like very anxious or very depressed. Sometimes it's just happy in the sense that they don't give a shit. And maybe that's where I stand. I would say for the depressed or anxious millennial, or the proud or whatever boomer, you have a Zoomer like me who doesn't give a shit. And it's kind of trying to enjoy things as they are. And, I'm enjoying my life in the sense that it doesn't fucking matter. But I'm not like, I'm so anxious about the future. I'm so depressed. I don't give a shit. It's gonna, and I'm, the depression or whatever it is, the loneliness for me is only an excuse for me to explore deeper into things that I find interesting, which is the way I'd spend my time if I had all of Bezos's money. So it's no different to me. But I don't know, maybe I'm not in tune enough with, I guess Gen X and the older generations to know what their defining characteristics are. But I certainly think a lot of millennials kind of embrace this anxiety or depression as an axiom of their existence, whereas Zoomers are more nihilistic. I don't know what the Gen Alpha is though. This iPad generation. Maybe they're so out of touch with their own emotional state that they're unable to even articulate or even to show any kind of emotion other than, I don't know, brain rot. I don't know. I kind of worry for their basic computational abilities, and I don't mean in the like existence sense. There will still exist iPad babies who do great things or make the next big tech Ponzi scheme or something. But I think as for your average, kind of your, I don't know, mid-low level would-be 1960s factory worker level of Gen Alpha, I'm not sure what they will do or look like or be. I mean, it's a little harrowing to think about, but I don't care. So I don't know. It's I guess I won't beat on generations too much, only because it's I have no grass to stand on. But that's kind of my whole gimmick. Is that I am worth nothing. You could strike me down tomorrow, it wouldn't matter. All right, I will be as happy dying tomorrow as I would in 40 years. What's a day? Maybe that also too is a bit too stoic. But let me move on to something else. A hallmark of humanity. This is a kind of the cornerstone. This is, and I'll kind of try to make my argument around here. Cornerstone of humanity is our limitations, our ability, and I'm not saying it's a bad thing either. I'm going to get around to reframing this in a way that isn't cynical either. cornerstone of humanity is our the fact that we are limited by what we can see, what we can say, what we can do, what we can produce. I mean, again, think about if I don't know, some great creator, I don't know, Michael Jackson or something, or maybe pick somebody who wasn't a pedo. I don't care. Most of them were. If they were not limited by their human ability to only produce so much music or whatever. Think of how much more hits we could have. How much more Michael Jackson we'd have. But then what if all music was Michael Jackson then at that point? I think the whole point, the whole reason it's at all valuable is that there was a limited body of work. At some point he just died and he moved on, right? There wasn't like this endless, there's Michael Jackson's never going to die kind of thing. And same with just what you can see and what you can hear, or, even just moments that you've had, like having them again makes them less valuable, right? Even a moment that you got married, like you don't, if you got married every week, what the fuck how special could that be really? No, you live and you die once, and you do a lot of stuff that's most important probably just once. And that's what makes it so valuable. So I think part of the reason that a lot of these tech people don't, I guess maybe not really tech, I think accelerationists really might be a better word to frame these people as, are like, they don't, think much more that are artists, people that could produce, and they could produce so much more and more. That isn't always better, right? I think part of the whole beauty of it is that we're limited in what we can see and do, and then the limited body of work that is produced by some great artist is what gives it any kind of gravitas, right? It wouldn't be any better. It'd be worse if there was, 80 versions of the Lil Uzi Vert album versus just the one, right? There's one song that, is that all-time banger. I don't, it's not necessarily good to have more. Maybe it's just the, I was thinking about this in a maybe different sense that isn't totally related to humanity, but for most of our existence, humans were plagued with subsistence, right? We were, we were worried about the next meal. We were surviving, right? It was all a survival subsistence game, right? Just to get enough to survive, right? Because if you die, that's it. And we wanted, biologically, we were pushed to survive, so that makes sense. But now we're battling gluttony. I mean, maybe just in a very Western sense. Maybe I'm sure in Africa they'd pick a bone with that if they had an internet connection. But sorry, but we're battling gluttony more than anything. I mean, we battle like not eating too much. Well, again, what a hilarious problem. I think if you go to an African country and you tell them that people are dying because they're eating too much, like, what are you talking about? We don't have enough food. We're trying to survive, and you guys die by eating too much. So it's same with just a whole concept of subsistence versus gluttony. And I think a lot of the accelerationists we want more. We can have more thing and more, like more art or more of whatever the hell they're trying to make. But I think viewing more is always better. Might be a little flawed in the sense that it's gluttonous, right? I want more clothes. You don't need. What is this? Like, do without that. I think that was a big, like, two words that were ringing, very loudly in my ears this morning, for whatever reason. I'm not even sure, but it was just do without, right? If I just don't need this at all, it's gone. It's not there, right? There's no. It doesn't. Like, just do without it, right? I mean, it's whether or not, like, debating which, I don't know, whatever thing I need or some shit. What if I just don't need it at all? What if it's just not there? Interesting. But I think we're so tuned to, like, maybe it's a biological impulse to, like, have this, kind of a scarcity mentality where it's like, what if there's not going to be enough, or what if there's this, that we're very much like, I need to optimize and pick the best and do the most, when you could also just not, just do without it. It could just not exist at all. Or you just don't need the extra clothes. You don't need all that. There's no there's no optimization problem to be had. That's ignoring the problem and moving on to a different one. Which, again, I'm not advocating to not solve problems, because, I mean, all I'm wrestling with here are just these weird abstract problems. They're just framed differently, or they're more philosophical in some sense, but there's still problems that I could solve. And I could just say, no, don't stop trying to ask these stupid questions. But and I think part of it is I know that I'm incapable of completely, humans collectively, all of human consciousness formed into one big brain. I think we'd still be incapable of conceiving our own consciousness, right? Not to even mention our like our subconscious, or dreams and all these other abstract ideas that I like to wrestle with. But part of the fun of this is just playing with it, is wrestling with it, is kind of I guess playing with it as a game, kind of knowing that I'm never going to win, or I'm never going to find an answer. That's part of the beauty of wrestling with it. So it's not about me making some device to do something or to solve this problem of philosophy. It's really just, I have this existence, and I choose to kind of have fun and wrestle with these problems and play on the swing set. And then when my time is called, I'm dead. Bada bing, bada boom. Next, or not next. Maybe that's it. Probably is. But regardless, I don't know. I got way off track of the whole humans are limited thing, but I don't know. I think it's a defining characteristic is that we only have a certain amount that we can consume. I think that's one way to phrase it. Is I was thinking about producing so much earlier, but we only have so much that we can consume. Like no matter what we try to fuck around with our eyes and our brain and whatever, like our eyes can only see so much and process so much. Our mouths can only say so much, and our hands can only shake so many hands at once. There's very limited. So it's like the selection of which, people want to optimize. They want to say, oh, if I only have 100, maybe I have 20,000 handshakes in my life, I want to make sure I'm shaking those 20,000 of the best. It's always this optimization problem of like the best and the best and the best. Whereas I feel like there's a certain spontaneity and randomness and kind of joy that we should take in the fact that there's the optimization problem at all is one that perhaps isn't worth wrestling with. And I think making it all worth, we spend so much time, maybe it's just putting ourselves in this like innovator's dilemma where we're so worried about the perfect solution we don't ever bother to do any of it at all, right? We're so worried thinking about the problem that we don't ever bother doing anything, or even enjoying any kind of solution. So if we like make a shitty solution to a problem, we don't even bother using it before we're like so fixated on making a better solution. There's better ways of phrasing that, and I've done it in videos past, so I won't rehash it. But regardless, it's kind of an interesting way to think about a lot of the problems we wrestle with. Maybe that's my whole issue with, I guess, maybe a lot of modern work is that it all seems so stupid. It really is hard to even pretend to care about stuff, and it's why I kind of reject it so strongly. But regardless, there's more arguments to be had around all kinds of that. But I want to move on to something else. Why am I doing this? And I guess why does anyone do anything? But I want to speak more specifically, and maybe because I had a thought about why I would bother doing any of this. And I guess one excuse is just to get me to explore my mind and the world and wrestle with problems, whatever. But I think maybe more selfishly, all of these stupid videos and really even all the shit posting Linux videos, all that stuff. One way to frame it is it's all kind of a gift to my future self. Maybe not even just me. Maybe just like, I don't know, any really could be a gift to anyone. But I guess assuming no one ever sees this, which is fine. The point isn't for me to make it for other people or for not to be a gift to other people, but it's a gift for myself. When I'm a bit older and I've seen or opinions have changed and things, which they will. I'm saying maybe they totally will. I'll have something to look back on, this repository of sorts where I have a brief insight into what the hell I'm talking about. And that's part of the reason why I started the Drop from the Bucket blog too, was that, while this medium is great for hearing my voice, and it's probably a lower medium of, engaging with than like, reading my literature and writing, I don't discount the power that like written words have on paper. Books have, as much as we've tried to kill books with, Kindles and all this other bullshit and, AI, 3D video, whatever, books still live. I mean, I still buy books with the tiny amount of money that I do have. I still buy books, hard books with printed, like the same shit that like, Ben Franklin was printing on sheets of paper. Same, I mean, again, maybe the paper's more dyed with fabric and the ink is from is a fake ink, is not from a squid or whatever, or ego or something. I don't know where they got this fucking ink. But regardless, it's still the same basic medium, right? And I think that's part of why, I want to do some writing, because again, maybe it's pixels on screen, it's not ink on paper, but I suppose if you wanted to archive what I could print it out. I suppose I would be the one to do this, but I could print out my my blogs on sheets of paper and have those as a repository. But regardless, I know that the written word is meaningful, and transcripts of this wouldn't quite be the same, just because I think writing versus speaking are very, very different. And while I think compared to most other writers, I might, maybe, I don't know, actually, I could be totally lying to myself here. I like to say I write more closely than I speak than other people do, but I think that's actually a total lie now that I'm thinking about it. I would like to believe that my writing is more closer to how people speak. I use commas a lot, because when you're speaking, and maybe only if you've read a certain number of transcripts of people, but there's a lot of pauses. Sentences are very long. But when you're writing, you want these like short, punctual. There's almost like a music to written words that speech is a little different. There's a music to spoken words too, but these are different melodies. If I could be so metaphorical, right? There's a different melody to the spoken word than the written word, and I think the different mediums give me, are two different kinds of gifts to myself, my future self. I can kind of enjoy the music of my musings in several ways. So maybe this is all just a big selfish act, me just being a selfish piece of shit, hearing what I have to say, listening to my own self in the future, whereas I should be, doing the good capitalist boy thing and reading what only other smart people have to say instead of my own dumbass self. But I don't know. I think it is virtuous to try to produce something of yourself, of your own. And I think it is viceful to do otherwise. So until somebody wrenches the keyboard and the recording software from my hand and forces me not to write or speak, I'll keep making these because I think they are a good use of my time, and I'll wrap it up there. But anyway, thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace out.